Arvad J. Forlorn sat in his driveway for a moment, puzzled and even a bit nervous. Finishing a podcast about the rules and regulations of flying his mini drone, he stopped paying attention once he realized he couldn't remember his drive home. He thought back to the path he always took when he would leave work. The road leaving his office that connected to the interstate? Nope, he couldn't remember being on that road. He remembered saying goodbye to his coworkers and getting into his car, setting up his podcast he would be listening to for his 30-minute drive. Yeah, he remembered that too. Putting his car in gear and leaving the office parking lot. It's vague, but he seemed to recall a few details. After that, there was nothing. Was he so enthralled in his podcast that he just didn't pay attention to the details of his drive? Obviously, nothing went wrong. He was home, safe and sound. Arvad shook the uneasy feeling. He was hungry and wanted to enjoy the rest of his day before he had to retire for the evening. The bright sun was beginning to fade behind the horizon, and his day had been long enough already, without having to worry about being stuck in an endless mind game so trivial as being in autopilot for 30 minutes. He reassured himself that he was aware of driving while it was happening. He turned off his car and went into his house. When he got inside, he noticed it was just as dim as the fading light outside. He didn't really think anything of it as he reached for the light switch. This was probably one of those times when his kids had baseball practice and they would be home eventually. Arvad didn't really keep up with their busy schedules. His family knew this and it didn't bother them. He was a busy man. As the lights flickered on, Arvad kicked off his loafers at the shoe trade next to the door and ventured further into his home. When no one was around, Arvad would enjoy pizza or a sandwich, something easy, something that didn't require a lot of time to eat. He could plop down in his favorite recliner and read a novel or watch a little TV before his house became a roaring fun dome of explosive energy from his kids. This was his time, and he enjoyed it in the moderation that it was given to him. The night fell rather quickly. A warm evening such as this wasn't something he and his family would often waste, and it seemed his family was out enjoying it a bit longer than usual. Still, nothing to be concerned about. Maybe they went out to get a quick bite. So Arvad J. Forlorn slumped into his recliner until there was a nagging thought. The same thought that bore a hole into his mind when he got home. How did he even get home? Trying to read his novel, the thought persisted. Do you remember getting on the interstate? He thought to himself. The answer was no. So he put his bookmark at the end of the chapter he had just finished and tried to retrace his steps back to the office. So there was nothing. Once his mind visualized leaving the parking lot, there was nothing at all. He was just home, and a half hour had passed from leaving work up until he pulled into his driveway. As safe as his drive home apparently was, it wasn't without some concern. The thoughts of something being seriously wrong with him banged away at his busy mind. Was this the beginning of dementia? Was this how he was going to go out of this world, not remembering or knowing anyone he loved? Stop thinking like that, he yelled at himself. He must have said it loud because his ears heard the words escape his mouth in a tone he wasn't used to. The minutes turned into hours and Arvad's family still wasn't home. The house was dark with only a single light on that he turned on when he got home. He began to worry a bit, but not too much. This was Friday night, and it wasn't unheard of for his wife to take their two boys out to a movie, but he decided to call her phone anyway, just to make sure. As he heard the dial tone, he also heard the familiar ringtone his wife had chosen for him personally coming from the bedroom. Arvad stepped into the bedroom to see the phone ringing on the side table of her side of the bed. She left her phone again, he thought to himself. His wife was forgetful with her phone. Sometimes she would even forget her entire purse. Who could blame her? Handling twin boys for the past 12 years was enough to make someone forget their head if it wasn't attached. He looked into the dining room and there it was, her entire purse dangling from one of the chairs. Arvad's worry grew, but it wasn't enough to cause any alarm, really. Maybe the boys were at a friend's and his wife just got out and had a drink. When she would do this, she would only take her wallet to lighten her load. He seemed to remember something about that, come to think of it. He peered into her purse, feeling like a common criminal invading her personal space. Just as he thought, her wallet was missing. All is well, he thought, so he decided it was time to turn in for the evening. Arvad turned off the one light he had turned on when he got home hours earlier and started walking to the bedroom. Suddenly, something seemed off. Something other than his family not returning home yet. He couldn't quite place it. It was just strange. A feeling of not belonging. Just as he sat on the edge of his bed, Arvad rubbed his head in increasing confusion. Then, everything went black. The next morning, Arvad woke up to a busy house. He looked up and his wife, Avira, was putting away clothes that smelled of fresh wash. This smell was one of his favorites. It reminded him of being a child, when his mother would come into his room and ask him to put away his freshly washed laundry. It seemed Avira had the same ritual, always doing laundry on Saturday mornings. Arvad rubbed his eyes, which felt a little crusty, and sighed in relief that his wife was home. Avira heard his sigh and walked over to him. "Are you going to stay in bed all day, sleepyhead?" she said in a playful tone. Arvad was confused. It wasn't like him to stay in bed long. "What time is it?" he asked. "It's nearly noon. You looked like you needed the rest, so I let you sleep. But I could use your help with the boys. They have practice in an hour, and I have an appointment with my sister. Can you take the boys to baseball practice?" Arvad was still stuck on the part where she said it was almost noon. "Yeah, sure. Of course I can take them. Let me go get some coffee and wake up." It was kind of an unspoken ritual for the couple to have morning coffee together, but by this time Arvad had missed the chance to enjoy his caffeine with his wife. So he watched her as she did some busy work around the house for a few minutes. Once in a while, she would glance at him curiously. "What are you doing? Why do you keep staring at me?" Arvad reverted his eyes quickly, but was soon drawn back to her. "Nothing, just admiring you. Did you have a good time last night?" Avira smiled at the question. "Of course I had a good time. You were so funny. I don't think Ravi was as amused, but he'll get over it." Not one part of her statement made sense to Arvad. "What are you talking about? I came home to an empty house after work, and who is Ravi?" Arvad never thought of himself as a funny man. If anything, he was always being criticized for being too serious, especially lately. Avira chuckled. "Stop it, you had a blast too." Thinking he was making another joke to play off Ravi's unease of the mindless jokes, Arvad just stared at Avira, shook his head and shrugged his shoulders, acknowledging he had no idea what she was talking about. And he wasn't joking. "You can't be serious. You really don't remember? You must have drank more than I thought." Arvad shook his head in confusion again. But he was happy. His wife was safe at home, and he felt silly for worrying the night before. No matter how she tried to convince her husband, Arvad knew the night he had. But he saw that she was being serious. "No, seriously, who is Ravi?" Avira took notice. He really wasn't joking. "Are you okay? Ravi's been your friend for as long as I've known you." Arvad had to take a mental step back. What's going on here? He doesn't remember anyone named Ravi, and he knows he spent the night alone. The thoughts entered his mind again. Dementia. He didn't know anyone who suffered from it and didn't really know anything about it. He had just had a checkup the month prior, and he was in top shape. But something was definitely wrong, unless this was an elaborate prank. "Honey, I think I need to go back to the doctor. Something isn't right." Hoping this would bring her out of her joke and admit the truth. But none of that happened. Instead, Avira walked over to her husband and started rubbing his head. "If you really don't remember, we need to get you to the doctor right away." Arvad knew this tone. It was genuine concern, and it scared him even more. He told her of how his drive home went the day before, how he didn't remember driving, and how his memory was completely different than her telling of the evening. Avira didn't say it, but this was concerning. The weekend came and went without incident, aside from some guy named Ravi texting Arvad, "Hey man, Had a great time Friday night, read one text. I hope you didn't think I was mad. I just wasn't feeling well, read another. Arvad just responded, all good, thanks. And he left it at that. If this was an old friend that he didn't remember, he didn't want to just leave him hanging. Monday morning came. As Arvad got ready for work, he called his primary doctor's office. He explained what happened and stressed that he needed an appointment right away. Okay, Mr. Verloren, we have an appointment with Dr. Mikkel at 10:30 and another at 3 o'clock. Do either of these work for you? The receptionist said. Arvad wanted in as soon as possible. 10:30 would be great. Okay, you're all set. Don't forget to bring a photo ID and your insurance card. We'll see you at 10:30. The receptionist confirmed. Arvad responded, thank you so much. This meant Arvad would need to miss the beginning of his shift at work, but this was more important than an angry boss. He sat in his favorite recliner for a moment, trying to gather his thoughts of what to actually say to the doctor, a doctor he's never seen, not that he remembers anyway. He was actually trying to convince himself that everything was okay and that he was just overreacting. Maybe he had too much to drink that night and just remembered everything wrong. But there was one problem. Who the hell is Ravi? He obviously knows him somehow, or his name wouldn't be programmed into his phone. He decided it wouldn't hurt to go get checked out or referred to a specialist if needed. He allowed himself to doze off for a moment in his recliner. Arvad arrived at the doctor's office a few minutes early. He was always a stickler for punctuality. There was no issues with his drive over, well, none other than that name, who the hell is Ravi? But he had to put that out of his mind for now, as hard as that task seemed to be. Arvad stepped out of the car and walked through the automatic doors to the physician's office. He stepped up to the counter. Good morning, what brings you in today? Asked the receptionist. I have an appointment at 10:30 with Dr. Mikkel. And by the way, I love the new decor of the place. The receptionist, whose name tag read McKenya, shot him a glance. That's funny. We've had this decor for 15 years. It's so outdated. Arvad laughed. I was just here a month ago. The receptionist looked puzzled, but was used to patients with different ailments and how to respond to them. Can you verify your date of birth? Arvad responded, absolutely. November 5th, 1969. The receptionist clicked something on her computer screen. What's your name again? Arvad didn't remember telling her what his name was in the first place. Arvad J. Verloren. The receptionist clicked again at her computer. I'm sorry, Mr. Verloren. I don't see that you have an appointment. Wait, what? You're kidding, right? I made that appointment this morning and I'm pretty sure it was you that I talked to. I'm really sorry, sir, but I haven't taken any appointments all morning. As calm as she could be. She had had patients escalate quickly and was accustomed to keeping them calm. But I do have an 11 o'clock available if you'd like to take that. Arvad was tense, but the receptionist was accommodating. He knew there had to be some kind of mistake, but gladly accepted the new appointment time. Arvad sat in his seat in the waiting room. Normally, he would have picked up one of the old magazines laying around, but this time he just stared at the walls. They were different. He wasn't going crazy. The thought set in again. Dementia. Alzheimer's. How long had this been this way? Had everyone around him known and not said anything? Surely not. If that were the case, Avira would have discouraged him from making this appointment. And come to think of it, where was she? She said she would meet him at this office. Great, he thought. The world is going crazy, and I'm being abandoned in it. At 10:55, a nurse popped through the door leading to the examination rooms. Arvad J. Verloren? Arvad stood and started walking to the male nurse. He held the door as Arvad entered. What's going on, buddy? Arvad didn't approve of the way the nursing staff always treated him as a friend. He didn't know them on a personal level, but he tolerated it because it was their job. Just because he didn't approve of it didn't mean he would be rude about it. I don't know, really. I'm forgetting stuff. Losing time. I don't know. The nurse got Arvad's weight outside the examination room. No change there. Opened the door and allowed Arvad to enter first. Are you lightheaded? Any fogginess or confusion? Arvad shook his head. No, not really. Wondering if this answer meant something. The nurse asked a couple more questions, took Arvad's vitals, and said, well, I hope we get this sorted out for you, man. Dr. Mikkel will be in with you shortly. Arvad sat on the examination table and relaxed, thinking of the questions the doctor might ask. He knew his name, his birth date, the year, simple stuff. Where the hell was Avira? He kept wondering. It wasn't like her to miss something this important, or seemingly important. He tried to ease his mind a bit. Maybe it was stress. He had been under a lot of pressure at work. He'd made some clerical errors and was on the radar. A knock came at the door, and the doctor entered. I'm Dr. Mikkel. You must be Mr. Verloren. You can call me Arvad. My father was Mr. Verloren. He couldn't believe he'd said that out loud. Such a cheesy line. Dr. Mikkel chuckled. What's going on? Arvad ran through the entire story. The drive, the night alone, but he wasn't really alone, the office decor being different, and the botching of the appointment time. The doctor was patient, listening to it all. I'm sure this is worrisome, and I want to do some simple tests. Nothing evasive. Arvad seemed stoic. Okay. Dr. Mikkel started with simple stuff, asking his name, birth date, the year, family names, all easy questions. Then he handed Arvad a piece of paper on a clipboard. Draw a clock for me. Easy enough, a circle with two hands, one shorter than the other, radiating from the center with numbers around the edges. Good. Now, can you describe what a sheep looks like? That was an odd question, but Arvad told him about the wool and 4 legs. Awesome, the doctor proclaimed. These questions and drawings went on for another 20 minutes or so until the doctor said, I think we're good here. You're displaying great cognitive skills. I don't think you need a specialist. Have you been under a lot of stress lately? Arvad nodded his head and told the doctor about what had been going on at work. Reassuring Arvad there was really nothing to worry about, he sent his new patient on his way with a prescription for some muscle relaxers to help him relieve his stress. Arvad returned home to an empty house. Again, not unusual. The only question that remained, why didn't his wife show up at the doctor's office? Arvad sat in his favorite recliner, turned on a documentary about ancient civilizations, took a muscle relaxer, and dozed off. Arvad J. Verloren sat in his driveway for a moment, puzzled and even a bit nervous. Nearing the end of a podcast about natural phenomena, he stopped paying attention once he realized he couldn't remember his drive home. He thought back to the path he always took when he would leave work. The road leaving his office that connected to the interstate? Nope, he couldn't remember being on that road. He remembered saying goodbye to his coworkers and getting into his car, setting up the podcast he would be listening to for his 30-minute drive. Yeah, he remembered that too. Putting his car in gear and leaving the office parking lot? It's vague, but he seemed to recall. After that, there was nothing. Was he so enthralled in his podcast that he just didn't really pay attention to the details of his drive? Obviously, nothing went wrong. He was home, safe and sound. Shaking off the uneasy feeling and thankful to be okay, he stepped out of his car and into his home. He figured he was too concerned with his drive home to notice Ravi's car in the driveway, so it was a surprise to see Ravi inside, chatting it up with his wife, Avira, at the kitchen table. By the sound of his voice, Ravi sounded as if he had already started drinking. Arvad was usually the life of the party and quite a funny guy, but he tended to get annoyed when people would drop by unannounced, especially Ravi. He was a bit of a flirt, and Avira was not an unattractive woman by a long stretch, but he knew his wife well and didn't have to worry about anything. Ravi had always been a little keen on Avira, but she just laughed him off, reiterating that there was no mutuality. Ravi knew this, but he liked to have fun with it anyway. Immediately, Arvad went to his bar cart and poured a splash of bourbon into his favorite glass with one large ice cube. He didn't want to say anything offensive until he had at least one in his system. "There he is," Ravi shouted in a jesting tone. "Hey, Ravi, what are you doing here?" Was that too harsh, Arvad thought to himself. Who cares? It's been a long week and he didn't feel much like entertaining. Avira got up from the table and walked over to the oven where she had been preparing a lasagna. Arvad eyed Ravi. "Will you be joining us for dinner?" Ravi answered quickly, "Of course, as long as you're twisting my arm." Arvad smirked. "I'm not, but you're welcome to stay." Ravi shot him a curious look. "What's going on, man? Everything okay?" Arvad snapped out of his weird state of mind. "Yeah, sorry, I just had a weird drive home. Nothing personal." Ravi pulled the chair out next to him. "Have a seat. Let's catch up. Tell me about your drive." Arvad took the gesture in kindness. "There's really nothing to tell. I don't really remember the drive home. I didn't notice your car in the driveway and was just startled when I came in and saw you. You know how I get." Ravi would have laughed, but he saw Arvad was looking disturbed. "You didn't notice my car because it's in the shop. I had a friend drop me off." Arvad chuckled. "A female friend, I'm sure." Ravi just gave him a smile. As dinner progressed, Arvad and Avira's twin sons walked in the door from baseball practice. Arvad had completely forgotten that they had practice and he was supposed to pick them up. Usually when this happened, another parent would bring the boys home. No big deal, but it didn't stop Arvad from feeling bad about not being there for them. "Are you hungry, boys? Your mom made lasagna." Throwing down their gym bags, the boys rushed into the kitchen, ate as fast as they could, and ran off to their bedrooms where the sounds of video games and yelling could be heard. Over the course of the next hour, Arvad lightened up a little bit, just a little bit. Still annoyed that Ravi was there, but accepting his old friend for what he was. Jokes began rolling off Arvad's tongue like tiny needles shooting through the thick air. Avira was laughing hysterically at times, even to the point of having tears roll down her face. Ravi seemed less than amused. He would try to laugh off the jokes and knew that Arvad was just good at pushing buttons for his own comedy. But for some reason, this felt different. Ravi pulled out his phone, tapped on it a couple times, and put it back into his pocket. 5 minutes later, almost on the dot, Ravi stood up. "My ride's here. Avira, thank you for the wonderful meal. Arvad, I'll text you tomorrow or something." Arvad responded innocently. "Okay, good to see you. Be safe getting home or wherever you're going." One last jab. Arvad thought to himself, "Good. Come to my house uninvited when I'm not here? Prick." Once Ravi was gone, Avira sat next to her husband. "You had every right to be upset. That man has always given me a weird vibe. Showing up unannounced or uninvited? Thank you for running him off." This is one reason Arvad loved his wife so much. He knew his jokes were mean-spirited toward Ravi, and she laughed along with him about it. They were a team, a solid team. Yeah, I think the friendship with my old schoolmate has run its course. This didn't upset Avira in the slightest. "Come on, honey, let's go to bed. We can clean up in the morning." Arvad had forgotten about being unnerved by his drive home. All that mattered was Avira. It didn't take long for either of them to fall asleep. When Arvad woke up, he had a splitting headache, and the house was quiet, really quiet for a Saturday morning. He sat up quickly, a little too quickly. His head spun and tunnel vision set in. He closed his eyes and took a couple deep breaths. Opening his eyes slowly, he placed one foot on the floor, then the other. Pressing his feet onto the floor, Arvad took one step at a time. Looking around the house, there was no one there. The kitchen mess from the night before was gone. The house looked as if no one had been there in days. He called out, "Avira!" No answer. He looked into the boys' rooms and no one there. But their rooms were unusually clean, almost like a museum, in fact. The whole house was spotless. Arvad and Avira weren't messy people by any stretch of the imagination, but this was just different. He felt out of place. Was he missing something? Did he forget an anniversary, Avira's parents coming to visit? Nothing jogged his memory. He thought to himself, "Pull yourself together, man. She's probably out shopping or taking the boys to another practice." Whatever the case may be, he had a 10 o'clock tea time he wasn't about to miss. Arvad's head was splitting, so he took a pain reliever, got a shower, got dressed, brushed his dark hair, which was in need of a trim, and headed out the door with coffee and golf clubs in hand. He put his things into the back of his car, not the trunk, the back seat. Arvad treated his golf clubs almost as if he would his boys when they were babies. He'd never make his babies ride in the trunk. Looking at himself in his rearview mirror, he felt his short beard and gave himself a smile. Life is good. When Arvad arrived at the club, he walked into the open-air bar, ordered a cocktail, and headed inside. Walking past the front desk, there was some commotion going on behind him. "Hey, wait!" someone was yelling from behind him. He turned as the receptionist ran up to him. Out of breath, the young man asked, "Sir, do you have a membership here?" Arvad was really annoyed by this question. "Son, I've been a member here since before you were born." Gulping his breath, the boy responded, "Oh, good. Can I see your card?" How insulting. Everyone knew Arvad J. Forlorn, but he didn't want to cause a scene as others were starting to take notice. Arvad gave a wicked smile, which told the boy not to mess with him. He pulled his membership card out of his golf bag and handed it to the young gatekeeper. The boy looked it over for a second. "Sir, do you have another card? This one expired 2 years ago." Arvad could see 2 campus security forming about 20 feet behind the young man. "What? No, it isn't. I just got this renewed last month." He snatched the card from the boy, and the boy was right. Expired. Arvad's arrogant smile turned into a shameful disgust. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You can contact your sponsor and try to sort this out. Unfortunately, the administrators are gone for the weekend." Arvad didn't have the nerve to open his mouth again. His sponsor had passed away 6 months prior. At this point, his head was spinning so bad he couldn't think straight. He handed his cocktail glass to the young man and headed out the door. The security guards took to either side of him. "I promise, fellas, there's no need. I'm not going to make a scene." The guard on his left responded solemnly, "I'm sorry, sir. Standard protocol. Need to make sure you get to your car safely." Arvad sighed in disbelief. "Okay, then." Once in his car, Arvad looked in the mirror again. Somehow he looked older, run down. He barely recognized himself. "What the hell is going on here?" he said out loud. He knows Avira called and renewed his membership to the Twin Oaks Country Club just a month prior, if not sooner. He pulled up his phone from the passenger seat and tapped on his contacts and dialed his wife. Through his Bluetooth in his car, he heard the phone ring and ring and ring. Finally, the voicemail came on. He tapped on the text icon in her contact, typing out, "Where are you? There's some sort of problem at the club. Call me as soon as you get this." Arvad then slumped into his seat, confused over the country club and now worried about Avira. When Arvad felt stressed or worried, there was a lake close to his house he would go to collect his thoughts. With his phone tight in his hand, ensuring he wouldn't miss the call when his wife inevitably called him back, he sat on the lake shore and started skipping small rocks on the calm water surface. After about an hour, he had enough and just wanted to go home. He got back into his car, drove home, and sat in his favorite recliner. Head splitting, he took one more of his migraine medicines and dozed off. Arvad J. Forlorn awoke in his bed the next morning, no less confused than he had been the day prior. The doctor said there was nothing to worry about, just stress. Dr. Mikkel advised him to take a couple days off work, so he called his boss and did just that. Strangely, his boss seemed okay with it. "Take as much time as you need. Come back when you're ready." Arvad ran his fingers through his short hair and sighed. House empty once again. No sound of the boys getting ready for school, no Avira rushing around to prepare lunches. It was just Arvad. He reached to his left to his lamp on his bedside table and clicked it on. He turned his body to stretch out the stiffness in his back and neck. First to the left where he could see the doorway open, holding there for a few seconds to get any unwanted kinks out. Then to his right, and he noticed it. Avira had left her phone again on the bedside table. Still plugged in, the phone lit up with a text message. "Where are you? There's a problem at the club." It was from him, who his wife had him listed as my hubby. He didn't remember sending that text and didn't really understand why he would send it. So he checked his phone, and there it was, the text he apparently sent. But the text was sent on Saturday. It's now Tuesday. She hasn't looked at it yet. Granted, Avira wasn't big on modern technology. She thought cell phones and gadgets were just a way to keep her from enjoying life's realities. But 3 days? Just then, an appointment reminder popped up on his phone. He almost forgot he had an appointment with his therapist that afternoon. His job had caused him so much stress over the past 2 years, he would look for another, but he had almost 20 years invested in this company. Besides, it was nice talking to someone about it who wasn't involved in his own life. It was a good day to talk to the good doctor. He was feeling really depressed over his recent visit to the physician just the day before. It took him a bit, probably another hour, but he pulled himself out of bed and jumped in the shower. He stood in a towel in his mirror. He wiped the steam from the mirror and realized he was looking older than he had noticed before. His short beard graying, his hair was in desperate need of a trim. Arvad mustered the energy to get himself dressed, made a cup of coffee, and sat at his table catching up on the prior day's stock prices. Arvad J. Forlorn awoke in his recliner. He had slept the entire night there. Avira was standing over him, smiling. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Arvad smiled up at her, but he had questions. "Hey, there's something wrong with my membership at the club. I know you called and renewed it last month, but it's expired." Avira looked puzzled. "Yeah, I know I called and renewed it. Let me see your card." Arvad rose himself from the recliner and made his way to his golf clubs in the garage, opened the zipper pocket, and retrieved the membership card. He handed it to Avira without looking at it, and she started laughing. "Dude, you're losing your mind. Look at it again." He snatched the card with a playful smirk, and there it was. The membership was good for another 11 months. Admittedly, he didn't really look at the card when he had handed it to the reception boy. "Okay, I have some strong words for that, kid. Wait, where were you all weekend?" Avira didn't like this accusing tone and really didn't know how to respond. "Honey, what do you mean?" "I mean Saturday and yesterday. I texted you and called you and there was no answer." Avira was getting visibly upset. "I was here with you all weekend. Other than Saturday, I had a lunch date with my sister and you took the boys to baseball practice." "I'm starting to worry that you really don't remember." Arvad looked confused. He knew she wasn't there, and Saturday was the day of the country club incident. He had not had that much to drink Friday night. "Are you sure you didn't spend the weekend with your sister or something?" Avira was now really concerned. "You've been keeping track of me a lot lately, not remembering time with me, and even forgot who Ravi was. I didn't want to bring it up again, but I'm worried about what's going on with you. Don't you have a doctor's appointment to address this today?" "Yes, here it is." Avira handed Arvad the note he made about the appointment. "Dr. Mikkel, 10:30. Arvad could not remember calling the doctor even, nor writing this note, but it was in his handwriting. Avira sighed. "I said I'd go to the doctor with you. Now get dressed. I'll drive." When the couple arrived at the doctor's office and stepped inside, Arvad noted the new look of the office to Avira. She was really getting concerned. They had just been here a month ago, and it was the same decor. But she just played along. "Yes, honey, isn't it nice?" "I mean, it's okay. Still looks like a doctor's office," responded Arvad with his usual comedic tone. The reception at the front desk was normal. Name, birth date, reason for visit. "Have a seat and we'll call you back shortly." When he got called back, Avira went with him. Same procedure. Height, weight, vitals. "What's been going on, buddy?" Arvad was hesitant to answer. Avira spoke up. "He's forgetting a lot of stuff lately. We're really worried." Arvad looked at her curiously. "We are? I mean, now that you say it like that, I am kind of worried." Dr. Mikkel ran through the same procedures, drawing different things, asked important personal questions, and Arvad aced the inquisition. "Have you been under a lot of stress lately?" Arvad replied, "Yeah, got this promotion at work and there's been a lot more responsibility put on me. I worry constantly about keeping my job. Dr. Mikkel smiled. Stress can do a lot of strange stuff to our bodies. Lapsed in memory not excluded. It's rare, but it happens. I'm going to prescribe you a muscle relaxer for you to help calm you when you feel stressed. I suggest you talk to a therapist as well. Arvad shot him a look. No, I don't think you're crazy. It just helps talking to someone who isn't close to your situation. An outsider, you know. Arvad didn't think anything of it. Yeah, okay, Doc. Arvad J. Forlorn arrived at the therapist, Dr. Heiler's office. He sat in the waiting room and pondered everything that had been going on. How can he even explain these strange events without being locked up? Finally, he was called back to the office. Arvad was no less confused on how to explain this. Dr. Heiler stood up to greet him. Good to see you again, Arvad. How is everything? Okay, this tall, bald man with a graying beard was just going to jump right into it this time. Arvad was already on edge, nerves making his hands shake. The doctor motioned for him to take a seat, but Arvad wasn't ready to sit just yet. Instead, he opted to pace in front of Dr. Heiler as the therapist took his usual seat. I don't know what's happening to me. I'm forgetting a lot of stuff. Dr. Heiler kept his composure hidden very well. Forgetting stuff? Like what? Arvad was visibly tensing up, scratching at his wrists, tapping his head nervously. Well, it started Friday when I couldn't even remember driving home from work. Dr. Heiler, ever the optimist, well, that's common to be on autopilot when you're traveling a path you frequent. Yeah, that's what I thought too, but that night I spent it alone. Avira wasn't there and the boys were gone too, but the next morning they were all there. When I asked Avira about it, she said she had been with me all night and I made Ravi uncomfortable. I don't even know anyone named Ravi, and I know I was alone all night. The doctor interrupted him. Avira, your wife? Yes. What other Avira could there be? The therapist's composure became harder to hold. You're saying your wife was at your house Saturday morning? Yes, she lives there. Where else would she be? Arvad was getting mad at this line of questioning. Arvad, how have the meds been going that I prescribed you? The meds. Arvad had forgotten about them. He'd been taking them so regularly he didn't even notice them anymore. I guess they've been okay. I miss a day here and there, but whatever. Dr. Heiler pointed at the big comfortable chair across from him again. Please sit. Arvad was tired, but not ready to sit down just yet. He held up a hand in protest. Dr. Heiler continued. Arvad, you're sure Avira was at your house Saturday? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. What about the boys? Were they there too? Arvad answered, yes, I took them to baseball practice while Avira went on a lunch date with her sister Saturday. Dr. Heiler paused and pointed at the big brown leather chair once again. This time Arvad sat, but only on the edge of the chair. What's wrong with me, Dr. Heiler? I'm here because of the things I don't remember, not because of the things I do remember. Arvad, we've had the same conversation in the past. There's no easy way to say this, so I'm going to just come out with it. I'm so very sorry. Avira and your sons died in a car accident 2 years ago. Arvad fell back into the chair. No. I was just with them this weekend. The doctor could see Arvad's resignation as the truth sank in. The memories came flooding back to Arvad, the horrible tragedy that took his family from him. The circles under Arvad's eyes darkened. The fear, anger, sadness, all of it washed over him. Arvad began sobbing with strained breath. They were there. I was with them. It was real. I'm not making it up. Dr. Heiler brought forth his most caring side. Arvad, you've been under a lot of stress. Losing your entire family isn't an easy thing to move forward from. Creating new memories of them is becoming your way of coping. Arvad got angry. I'm not creating new memories. They were real. Arvad, I know they feel real, and that's okay. But one day I'm afraid it's going to cause you some real damage. I've been your therapist for 2 years. You've always had a difficult time with this, and that's understandable. But this is new. I'm worried the meds are actually making it worse. The rest of the session was a mixture of sadness and anger. Once again, Arvad had to face the truth that his wife and sons were no longer around. Arvad wiped away his tears. Dr. Heiler, am I crazy? Dr. Heiler sharpened the corners of his mouth to a slight smile. No, Arvad, I think you're going to be okay. Arvad left Dr. Heiler feeling no better than when he got there. He thought he was there to talk about his memory, forgetting things, but ended up remembering things he was trying to forget. Since losing his wife and sons, his life had become a mess. He always felt like he was born to be a family man, and one drunk driver took that all away from him in an instant. His job was in the tanks, he had no real friends, and he barely left his house. But he knew his wife and kids were there. He felt Avira's lips on his. He hugged his sons. That couldn't be made up. But if it was what Dr. Heiler said, then Arvad had nothing left to live for. On his drive home, thoughts turned to the handgun he kept in his closet. He couldn't bear to live with his grief over and over. Filled with anxiety and at the same time a sense of duty, Arvad drove faster down the dark roads leading to his empty home. Arvad J. Forlorn and Avira left Dr. Mikkel's office and had a late lunch. They had been at the office longer than they were expecting, but this was cause for celebration. No signs of dementia. That was more of a relief to Avira than it had been for Arvad. He knew he was having some memory lapses, but it didn't seem like a big deal. He and Avira laughed together, but he could tell she was still a little concerned. Honey, I'm glad Dr. Mikkel doesn't think it's dementia, but I think you should seriously consider going to see the therapist he recommended. Arvad pulled out the referral card and read the name out loud to his wife, Dr. Christoph Heiler. Yeah, I'll think about it. It might do me some good. They finished their lunch and headed out of the restaurant. Avira asked, would you mind if I drop you off at home? I wanted to speak with some of the other parents at the boys' practice. Arvad replied, yeah, that's fine. I'll just sit in the recliner and read my book or something. They got into the car and everything went black for Arvad. The next thing he knew, he was walking to the front door of his house. No memory of how he even got there. The front door was unlocked. Cautiously, he entered his home. Dark inside, he reached for the light switch next to the door. When the light flickered on, Arvad J. Forlorn stood before himself with a gun aimed at his head. They stared at each other. This wasn't the first time he had seen this intruder. The first time was 2 years prior when the gun holder saw his double on the news. He had been drinking and driving and was the cause of a fatal crash that took the lives of one woman and her twin sons. You took my life from me. Now I'm going to take yours. Arvad J. Forlorn aimed, squeezed the trigger, and with a flash, he jerked awake in his bed. Avira hurrying the kids to get ready for school. A sense of calm washed over him. He smiled. After that moment, there were no more lapses in his memory. The universes had collided one final time. Or so he thought. A month later, the universes collided one more time to fix what Arvad J. Forlorn had broken. A drunk driver crossed into oncoming traffic and took the lives of his wife and his sons once more.